and welcome to the Empathy Day Festival. I'm going to be sparking empathy with you through my book. Let me say a little bit about me. I'm Michael Rosen. You may have known one of my books when you were very young called We're Going on a Bear Hunt, or you may have known me from a meme where I say something like this, oh, nice. Or you may not have ever heard of me before. That's absolutely fine. And I'm going to be talking about a book called One Day. And it's quite a mysterious book, and it happens at a terrible time in the world. It happens at a time during the Second World War when people were being persecuted and killed in all sorts of different ways. But this story is about people who resisted and survived. If you jump into my story, you'll meet a character who does an extraordinary act of kindness, but not just kindness, there's bravery as well. Now, I should just say it's not a novel, so you don't build up a whole sense of the character. It's more stark, or what we sometimes say stylized than that. So what we have really are little phases in a story. So in a way, that leaves it to you, the reader, to try and figure out the motives. Why would someone be that kind and that brave in the face of such danger? So there's going to be a little bit of a mystery for you there. All right. So as I've said, the book is called One Day, a true story of courage and survival in the Holocaust. Now, maybe you've heard of the Holocaust. That's a word we use to describe the extermination. Now, that's a horrible word to use, but the extermination of 6 million Jews during the Second World War, and is sometimes enlarged to mean the other civilians who were killed by the Nazis during that time as well. This story focuses on some French Jews, though their origins are in Hungary, but they've come to live in Paris, and they're in what's known as the Resistance. Now, you may have heard of them as well. They were people who resisted the Nazis, that's to say, fought back against the Nazis, who were occupying France. So they'd come from Germany, the Nazis, and they were in the French resistance. So it's quite complicated. Hungarian Jews living in France who are in the resistance. And I've cast the story in the voice of one of those people, because I found out about him. His name in French, you'd say Eugène Anchou. We might say in English, come German, Eugene Handschuh. Okay? And how did I find out about this story? For a tragic reason. It's that they were deported. You may know that word, it means like transported, but deported from France. And they were on a train that was heading to this terrible prison camp, but it was also an extermination camp called Auschwitz. And they were on a train that was called Convoy 62. And on that train were my father's uncle and aunt, Oscar, sometimes called Yeshia, Oscar, and his wife, Ruchel, also said as Rachel. Oscar and Rachel were on that train. They didn't escape. My relatives didn't escape. But this is the story of how Oscar and his friends, Yeshia also called, how they escaped. And so I wrote it in his voice because I found out all about Oscar Handschuh. And this is how the story goes. One day, our lives changed. We didn't think about yesterday, and tomorrow may not happen. We had to cope with what was in front of us on that one day, get through one day and then on to the next, one day at a time, one day after another. We were Hungarian Jews living in an area called the Marais in Paris. We were communists in the resistance. This meant we were in hiding. We were fighting the Nazis, and the Nazis were hunting down Jews like us. We had false papers which were about to run out. We had to pick up the new ones from our old home in the Marais. But my father and I were spotted. We were followed, and we got picked off. It was the 28th of December, 1942. This, one day, changed everything. We were no longer free to fight the Nazis. We were arrested by the French police and handed over to the Nazis. We were interrogated. That meant we were beaten. Then we were sent to Compiègne camp. We had hardly anything to eat, a little ball of bread a day. We were in the camp for 2 months, breaking stones. I was just skin and bone. Get through one day, and then on to the next, one day at a time, one day after another. Then we were transferred to the camp at Drancy. This was a new housing estate that had been turned into a prison camp for Jews. Jews were being deported day by day. We didn't know where. All that we knew was that they didn't come back. We called the place they were deporting people to Pichipoi. We said over and over, we're not going to Pichipoi. We came up with the idea of digging a tunnel to escape. We started on the 15th of September 1943, one day that changed our lives. Get through one day, then on to the next, one day at a time, one day after another. So the book tells the story of how they dug the tunnel, and it says how they were discovered, how they were put on the train, how they escaped from the train, but then something awful happened. They escaped from the train. It was about 12 of them. They jumped from the train. But as they jumped, the man who's telling the story, he's called Eugène Anchou, as I say, and his dad was called Oscar, like my relative. And Oscar banged his head against the wall of the tunnel. And the rule in the resistance was, don't go back. So they ran on. And Eugène left his dad in the tunnel. And you know what that meant? He would be discovered and he would be shot. But nevertheless, they left him. Anyway, Oscar woke up, okay? Eugène's dad woke up and he headed to a farm. And this is the moment I want to focus on. So this is Eugène speaking about his dad. What about Dad? When he jumped, he hit the roof of the tunnel and passed out. When he woke up, he realized he had to run. He got to a farmhouse and the couple living there took him in. They bathed his wound and hid him. When the Nazis came looking for him, the couple said they knew nothing. I often think about that. If the Nazis had found my dad, they would have shot that couple. I've never forgotten them, Monsieur and Madame Médard. So that's on a double-page spread in my book. And as you see, as I said, I didn't develop the characters, and neither did Eugène, who's telling the story. He didn't. But there is this incredible moment. You think about it. And I'm going to take you to this to suggest something you could do. You imagine, in the middle of the night, someone knocks at your door, and he's got a bad wound, and what does he say? He says, I jumped from a train. Does he explain where the train was going? Doesn't really know where the train is going. He's only got this word, Pichipoi, but they know people never come back. Does he say that? Does he say, I'm Jewish and we've been in a prison, a kind of prison camp that was just meant for Jews who are being arrested? Does he say he's in the resistance? Because that's dangerous as well. And then, this is the thing, they take him in. Now, how dangerous is that? They take him in, they bathe his wound, and then they hide him. And if it's a farm, we can imagine maybe it was in French they call it une grange. That's what we might call a stable or a barn probably. And they hide him there. And then the Nazis, the SS, that's what sometimes they're called, they come and they say, we know that people jump from a train. Is there any of them here? What do you say? Now, at that moment, you might give in and just say, yes, I think a man is hiding somewhere. Do you say that? Or do you say, nope, never heard anything, never seen anything? And then you know that when the Nazis go searching through the barns and through your outbuildings, if they find him, you will get shot. That's how dangerous it was. So here's my question. Why did they do that thing of saving Eugène Anchou's dad? Why did they save Dad's life? Why did they do that? I'm not even sure I know the answer to that, so I'm throwing it to you to ask you, because I can't think of a bigger step towards empathy than that, where you see somebody who's injured, who's running, and even though you know it's the danger to yourself, you still look after them. And then what they did was one of them took Eugène's dad, back to Paris. They found some money for him and took him back to Paris. Huge risk again, took him back to Paris where he met up with his son. So it all worked out fine. But at that moment, that key moment at the door when they said, we'll take him in and risk it and hide him and then lie to the Nazis who came knocking, that's what I want you to think about. So what I thought you could do is maybe do an improvisation in pairs. Or maybe what you could do is get in the pairs, and one of you could be Dad. His name is Oscar, like my relative. Okay, you could be like Dad, and you could explain what's happened to you. And then you could be either Monsieur, that means Mr., or Madame, and have that conversation. How did it go? And then you take him in. That's conversation one. And now the next one, another conversation. And this time one of you or two of you are the Nazi guards, and one or two of you are Monsieur or Madame Médard. And then you have that conversation, and you can improvise that. So you can work it out whether you do it in pairs or in threes or fours for that little scene. That's entirely up to you. So there we are. That's my activity for you. And I hope you enjoy it, even though it's very, very grim stuff. But we know this story, this little bit of what is one of the most terrifying histories ever to happen to human beings. This is a little moment of hope and courage and survival in World War II. Now, I said that the book is called One Day, and there's a kind of subheading after that, and it says, a true story of courage and survival in the Holocaust. Now, that word courage, that's actually the theme word for a week that is held every year, and it's called Refugee Week, and that's the word courage is in this year's Refugee Week. Now, you can see in that story that the people there, the man who's telling the story, Eugène Anchou, and his father and those others, they become refugees in the country they're living in. So remember I told you they came from Hungary, possibly because they were being persecuted in Hungary, or maybe they're what's called economic refugees, that life was too hard financially for them. They came to France, thought they were safe, and then because some people have invaded, the Nazis in this case, they're not safe. And that's what happened exactly to my relatives. So Refugee Week is about looking at refugees. Now, many refugees are in similar situations as to the ones in this book. That's to say, people fleeing war and persecution. And there are wars going on all the time in this world, very tragically. People are being persecuted in this world, and people run away from the homes that they care about and want to stay there, and then they run away hoping that they'll be safe somewhere else, which is what happened to my relatives. And even then they may not be safe because they might be persecuted there as well. And so that's what people look at during Refugee Week, and it's what we consider and think about, and that's why we have this whole week to think about it. So now I've got a little task for you. We often hear about refugees right now. There may be refugees in your school, in your street, in your village, in your town, and people say all sorts of things about refugees, and quite often they say why they're refugees. Now, they may say true things, and they may say things that are not true. So I wonder if you could do a bit of research for me. And this research is to find out why any refugee that you hear about, or refugees near where you are, or a group of refugees, why it is that they became refugees. So if I just prompt you a little bit on that, it may be because they fled a war, or it may be because they were what's called a persecuted minority, and you can look that up, and for other reasons as well. So that's a little bit of research I'm setting you. See if you can find out why some refugees that are near you or in the place where you're studying or anywhere like that, to find out why and how they became refugees. See if you can do that. Now, we'd love you to take part in the Empathy Challenge. There are 9 creative activities to try. You can try all of them, some of them, or just one of them. Check them out at Empathy Lab, that's all one word, empathylab.uk. Teachers, we'd love to see photos or videos of your work, so please share them, tagging at Empathy Lab UK, that's all one word, at Empathy Lab UK, hashtag Empathy Day Festival. Again, all one word, hashtag Empathy Day Festival. Well, that's it from me. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for taking part in the Empathy Day Festival. So all I can leave you with is, oh, nice.